Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FECGTV, which stands for the Fisher Educational Consulting Group television channel. I'm your host, the proud CEO and owner of the Fisher Educational Consulting Group. And if you're new to our channel and you're just joining us, let me just take a moment to tell you what we do here. So, this channel has been specifically created to highlight and elevate the voices of underrepresented populations, specifically in the field of education. Those populations are identified as something called BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, or women of color, or women in general who have historically had their voices muted in the field of education and just in general. What we do here is we survey the nation and we come up with very relevant questions to the field of education. And we find individuals who are subject matter experts and well versed in those areas. Then we bring them on as guests. So, in short, if you make it here, you are among the best. So, today we have special guest, Mrs. Carrie Kucka, who's going to be talking to us about how to build diversity and inclusion and equity within your school system. Mrs. Kucka, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your presence.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. How's the weather where you're at?
It's beautiful outside right now. I'm here in Michigan right now, and so the sun is shining and it's gorgeous.
Ah, but we know in the Midwest that can change at any time.
It can.
Okay. So for those of you that are new and join us today, our format kind of goes like this. We have an interview that lasts anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, never exceeding an hour because we want to honor the time of our guests. We generally ask anywhere from 8 to 12 questions to our guests. And then at the end of the interview, we give them an opportunity to expound on anything that we may have missed. So with that being said, Mrs. Kuka, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, so let's start with our first question. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Carrie Kucka. I am an educator, specifically in middle school. So I'm a building leader for an assistant principal at a school in Detroit, Michigan. The population is 99.9% African American. I was there for 10 years, 10 years. Um, I started off in education in actually when it comes to childcare. So I did before school, after school childcare in a suburban area. After that, I went ahead and realized that I loved education. Thought that I wanted to get into elementary education. So I went towards elementary education, started doing some pre-student teaching in the elementary field, and then realized, hey, this is a lot to go ahead and be in this elementary field with the little ones. Um, when it comes to childcare, you get to play with them and have fun, but it's a different story when it comes to education when you go ahead and you have those little ones right in the classroom in front of you. Ended up going ahead and getting my secondary certification is what I got. So grades 6 through 12. Realized after doing some pre-student teaching that that was definitely the right field for me to go ahead and be with the older kids, grades 6 through 12. Ended up going ahead, and at the time when I got into education, it was very hard to find a teaching position. Everybody was getting into education. There was so many educators that were out there, and everybody was fighting for jobs. I remember in particular, I contacted somebody who I knew worked in a public school and was HR, and she said they would get 800 applicants for just one position. So it was very difficult for me to find a job. And so I ended up going ahead and doing the before school, after school childcare, which the hours were like from 7 to 8:30, then 3:30 till 6 o'clock. And then I did some subbing in between those hours. Doing that, I was able to go ahead and kind of get out there and just see what was out there. Go ahead and go outside my area of the suburbs and obviously get into the area of Detroit. Absolutely loved it, fell in love with that area in particular, and decided to go ahead and apply for a Title I position in the city of Detroit. Ended up going ahead and getting that job as a Title I teacher. Absolutely loved it. It was in a charter school. Absolutely enjoyed doing that. And then all of a sudden, in the charter school world, what happened is those classroom sizes increased. And because I had been working in public school classroom sizes were larger. So they realized I had great classroom management. So they moved me into a wonderful classroom, which I absolutely love. But like education, when you're good in your field or you're good as a teacher, a lot of the times they'll move you into a coaching position. So once I saw I had great classroom management, I got promoted into a coaching position. I cried when I left that classroom because I love the kids so much. But I knew that was a great opportunity for me to add it to my resume. So went from a coaching position, and then once I went, when you're an instructional coach, sometimes that time isn't sacred, with building leaders, and they add other tasks. And so a coaching position became a leadership position, which I finally said I can go back to school and I can become a building leader, right? I can do administration work. So went back, got my educational leadership, and got my certification, and ended up going ahead and becoming dean of academics, assistant principal, and then became an intern principal. And then I went back to assistant principal because it's still kind of a new position for me. I've only been officially an administrator for 2 years. And so that's a little bit about myself. And now I'm kind of seeking out there to see, if I want to go back to the classroom or not. But definitely that's my field, is education. I love it. I love all roles that I've been in, and definitely value the fact of being in front of the kids.
Wow, thank you for sharing that information.
Yeah,
Also, I was looking at your bio and I wanted to tap in. Am I reading this correctly? Are you a native Detroiter?
I am a native Detroiter. That is correct. Yeah.
Okay, well,
Born and raised in Detroit.
all right. Wow. Okay. Thank you. I
Mhm,
think that might be very interesting to our viewers.
mhm.
So definitely thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things I want to talk to you about, clearly we're allegedly coming out of the pandemic. So
Mhm,
let's focus on that a little bit.
mhm.
Over the last couple of years, how has the pandemic impacted you, your students, and the staff you lead?
Oh, definitely. At the school that I'm at, but at the school, we were virtual for 18 months. And being virtual, there's so many things that the students miss. So many things that teachers miss, just checking in on your students, going ahead and circulating the classroom, seeing what they're writing, being right there in front of them. Definitely 18 months being virtual was not the way to go for anybody. But as we know, we had to like try to remain safe, during that period of time. Definitely notice that test scores, and when you take a look at data and stuff, you're noticing that the students are struggling, 2, 3 years behind in major areas, ELA and math. And then you're also noticing that we're having a lot of challenges with adults as well. A lot of social emotional needs, not only with children, but we're also having social emotional needs with adults. It really definitely did something, not only to kids, but it also did something, emotionally to adults. So I think that that's a big struggle. I think that having adults even come back to work, because as we know, we were on a lockdown or a shutdown during that period of time. I think that it did something to them in expectations, even too, work expectations as well. We're noticing that even some adults are even struggling, just like making it to work or actually showing up and actually having certain expectations for themselves, that are just your basic expectations of getting to work on time and leaving on time, which is a struggle. And it's a struggle in general. And in education, it's a huge struggle right now because we are such a need of teachers right now. I just hope that it doesn't continue to where we're just lowering our expectations of the people that we put in front of students. I understand that we're in a major need, and we're in kind of a crisis a little bit with finding highly qualified educators, but we definitely need to maintain those expectations of the adults in front of children.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Especially highlighting, I think we know so much about the students, but definitely highlighting the impact and how this is showing up for adults. That is, crucial to know. So thank you for sharing that with our viewers.
You're welcome.
Uh, you know what? I would love to, just as a school leader, I want to push you a little bit more. Let's
Mhm.
delve into that question a little bit more. How has it impacted you as a school leader and your ability to do your job?
That's a great question. So it definitely it makes it harder because you have to go ahead and you have to set those expectations with your staff, but you also have to understand your staff, and you also have to be show them a little bit of empathy as well. You definitely have to go ahead and have those tough conversations and actually get to know your staff with building rapport. There's a lot more of that that's involved as a building leader. It's not just that people come in and they do their job, they clock in and they clock out. You really have to get to know your staff in order to build that rapport so that you can have sometimes those tough conversations or even be supportive. And you can't be supportive unless you have that rapport with your staff or if you've been supporting them.
Thank you for elaborating. That was very helpful.
Mhm.
So one of the reasons I brought you on the show was because, as you highlighted, you've worked in very diverse environments, or actually, you've grown up in a majority African American city, and
Mhm.
you've worked in majority African American districts. And for our viewers, they have eyes; they can see that you're not African American, but clearly you've lasted in these environments, so you've mastered the ability to connect and engage the family and the students. So I kind of want to delve into there because, as we know, the field of education is, last time I did a check, it was 82% white and female.
Mhm.
So you identify as both. So we kind of want to pick your head because you've
Mhm.
been successful.
Mhm.
So my next question is, when we think about the words equity and inclusion, what does that mean to you?
I think that equity inclusion is kind of like being a part of something, right? I think employees and just people in general need to feel valued, right? They need to be feel valued, but they also need to understand. Like you have to understand how people are different, right? And you have to realize that you do recognize that other people are different, but you have to go ahead and you have to create a sense of belonging within that environment. And so I think that's very important to go ahead and do that. When I was a teacher, it was so important for me to go ahead and create a culture of a sense of belonging inside my classroom, right? That it didn't matter, that everyone had to go ahead and feel belonged inside my classroom. You had to feel that sense of belonging. And it helps you build rapport with people who are different. And it's okay to go ahead and recognize differences, right? And it's okay to do that, but you also have to celebrate those differences too and really get to know your students or get to know other people that are different than you.
Thank you so much. So if I take from there, your focus is creating a sense of belonging and community, no matter what position you're at, no matter
Mhm.
where you're. Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's go a little bit more in depth. So if you had to give advice to someone who was trying to build inclusion or community where they're working at, what would be your biggest advice with how they should start?
I definitely think that you should start with training and professional development. I think that that's really important. We're seeing that larger corporations nowadays are going ahead and actually doing that. You have to go ahead and do that so that you have knowledge of your fellow employees, that you can navigate through different diversities. I think that it's important to do that, and definitely, there's professional development, there's trainings that are out there, there's people that can help and assist with that, so that you're able to go ahead and navigate through that process. And doing so, like your employees become engaged, right? They become more engaged as too sometimes when it's that third party company that might be doing that or providing that service. And then the topics that they bring up a lot of the times are just great topics that you have somebody who's kind of neutral out here bringing up these topics and stuff, and then the conversation becomes better. And I think that only happens when you have somebody else kind of do that professional development, or that training because they understand the race, the gender, the religion, the sexual orientation, all these different things that are involved within the workplace.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So I kind of take away from your comments that one of the best ways to do it is through professional development. And if you don't have the expertise within your organization organically, bring someone in. But it's important to start with those crucial conversations to get
Mhm.
the ball rolling.
Yeah, and it's important to go ahead and say, hey, I don't know much about this. I don't understand how to go ahead and train staff when it comes to this. I need a little guidance when it comes to this. And it's okay to go ahead and say that and bring somebody in or get, the advice of somebody who is an expert.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, how do we get the entire district, including your leadership team, on board with these diversity and inclusion initiatives?
So sometimes it can be difficult to go ahead and get the entire team on board, right? I think that there has to be an understanding of why it's important. When people understand why things are important, then they seem to kind of say, hey, you know what? I understand the reasoning on why this is important. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at this and let's build some teams, that have to do with diversity and inclusion. Let's go ahead and let's seek the advice of others. Let's go ahead and let's look into a professional development, but really understanding that why should we do this? I think that that helps people understand. As we know, with corporations nowadays, it's huge to go ahead and provide that support, and it's actually has saved them money in so many different areas to go ahead and provide that support, because in the long run, if you are doing that, you're able to retain your employees, you're able to retain people, and people feel that sense of belonging. And then you're not going ahead and out there searching for more people to replace people that left because they didn't feel that sense of belonging. So I think that understanding that why is really important. And once people understand that why, or once your organization understands that why, then they'll be able to really go ahead and do some research on exactly providing that training and that professional development.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So, along those same lines, what would you say is the most difficult part of implementing an equity and inclusion program?
I definitely think that the most difficult part are all the different things that are involved, right? Going ahead and making sure that you find that right professional development, making sure that you have that right vision, and then getting everybody on board with that vision. Like I mentioned, it's race, it's gender, it's religion, it's sexual orientation. There's just so much that's involved there. And you really have to go ahead and make sure that you're finding and being able to work with somebody that is able to go ahead and develop teams within your organization. And that whole mapping out and process in itself, I think, is the most difficult thing. And then I go back to, that's why it's okay to go ahead and seek professional help, to go ahead and seek people who actually deal with this and actually go ahead and professionally develop people within an organization, because they know how people are, they know how corporations are, and they know how to support your needs the best.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You highlighted the complex process of intersectionality. A lot of things meeting there, or
It's a lot.
gender, yeah, gender orientation, sexual orientation, absolutely. So it's almost like trying to build the airplane while you're in the sky.
Oh, it is. It is. And you need to have those collaborative conversations, but you need to do it right. You need to do it properly to where it makes sense and where you have a vision and you have goals. And sometimes it's okay to go ahead and have those collaborative conversations and actually kind of backwards plan from what your goal is going to be.
Spoken like a true educator, backwards design. Are you starting with the end in mind? Is that
I
what you're saying?
am. I
There we go.
am.
All right. Perfect. Perfect. So, next question along those lines. Does your current school have a diversity task force?
No, my current school does not have a diversity task force team. Um, but I also can say that my current school has a high turnover as well. A lot of the times when you don't have a task force team that people do feel again that sense of belonging, it makes it very difficult to go ahead and be in the workplace. We had a definitely a rough year, going ahead and actually retaining teachers, and then teachers going ahead and staying throughout the current school year. So with that being said, I mean, imagine in the it affects children. Like imagine if you're in a classroom and you've had 2 or 3 teachers that are, within the classroom, and now you're just the student that's like, is this person going to last? Is this person going to be consistent, or this person won't be here that long, as the students say? I mean, to me that's a very upsetting statement, and it's very sad that students have to go ahead and actually deal with that. I don't know about yourself, but when I was in school, you had one teacher, and that teacher lasted throughout that entire school year. You knew that was your teacher the whole school year. I never had switching of teachers unless, number one, they were on maternity leave, or that was probably the only reason, to be honest with you. But I had the same teachers throughout the school year. And just the inconsistency of having a teacher that comes and then a teacher that goes because they don't feel that sense of belonging, and and then a new teacher who's temporary, but then they hire another teacher who's certified. Just that whole scope of things, what it does to a child. I mean, we talk about pacing guides in education, right? And we talk about how important it is to go ahead and stay on track when it comes to that curriculum, to provide that rigorous instruction. But how can that really take place if you have these has people that are just constantly in and out of the classroom? You can't really stay on track when it comes to a child's education when you have so much inconsistency. And one of the reasons why you have that inconsistency is because teachers don't feel a sense of belonging, or they don't feel supported. And that's why it's so important to make sure that teachers feel supported and that they have that sense of belonging.
I think you may have answered my next question, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to be more explicit if you'd like. So, although your current school district doesn't have a diversity task force, what are the benefits that you can imagine from having a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force up and running, active, doing its
Mhm.
job?
Yeah. I think that not only does it help children, right, with that consistency, as we said, they're our future, right? And so if we can't go ahead and we can't make sure that their education stays on track, they're going to continue to fall further and further behind. And so that's one thing, is that it's protecting our future, right? The kids that are in front of us. But the other thing too is that it's also helping adults as well. We talked about that social emotional and how we're seeing that more support is needed with adults, especially after COVID. It's important that adults feel social and emotionally supported. And one of the ways that you do that is creating a task force, checking in with adults, right? Making sure that they feel like that they're involved with a team, that they have that sense of belonging. Because if you don't do that, they're going to either leave their job, quit their job, or find another job that is going to support them in that way. And then if you don't have that task force team, you're just going to constantly have that rotating door full of employees.
You gave me a lot to unpack. And let me just finish writing my notes down for what you just said. You said more than a word there. Thank you.
Mm.
Very important. So, along those same lines, thinking around the sentiment of retention, because your school district is not the only school district experiencing extreme turnover.
Mm.
I mean, we're in the quote unquote great resignation. And I believe even before that, the field of education was on its way, if not firmly in the midst of a crisis with teachers. So just thinking about that, with the constant turnover, how do you give, well, first and foremost, how do you give your staff voice? But within that, how do you give the diverse members of your staff a voice? in the absence of a diversity task force?
So with the task force, what ends up happening is that they're able to go ahead and actually just check in with adults, make sure that their voice is heard, make sure that they can go ahead and just be known, right? Just because I think that sometimes what happens with diversity and with people that might be, as we talked about, that sexual orientation and all those different things, I think that they feel that they're invisible, right? And so with the task force, it allows you to make sure that their voice is heard, right? It incorporates them being part of a team, going ahead and giving their voice, right, when they want to. But I also think too that it's important too for them to be present, right? And sometimes it's hard for people to go ahead and say, hey, I have to sign up for this other thing, or I have to go ahead and be a part of this committee or this team. But you wouldn't believe the response that you do have, because in the beginning of the year, we tried to go ahead and start with this task force team, but we were under great leadership at that time. And you wouldn't believe the people that would say, you know what, that sounds like something that I want to do, right? That sounds like something that I definitely go want to go ahead and try to make my voice be heard or at least known, right? I want to be present. I don't want to be this invisible person, and people do, and at least you're providing that opportunity for them. But also it's important for that task force team to recognize the people that are kind of feeling invisible too. So you really have to have a good judgment and have people that are on your team that are good at reading people, right? That are good at going ahead and making sure that they know people. And if you can be able to read people, you can be able to do check-ins and go ahead and maybe just start that conversation with them, because I think it's important. A lot of the times, back in the day, we didn't mention anything, or we were very quiet about things, right? That we didn't go ahead and we didn't have open dialogue and conversation. And that's the key, is just having that open dialogue, having that open conversation with people.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let me press you just a little bit more, because this is going to serve as an instructional tool, or more so a resource tool for our viewers. So, in the absence of your diversity task force, how have you been able to create a pathway for voice for your staff?
That's a great question. That is an awesome question. It's been very difficult. As a building leader, it is completely difficult to go ahead and do that, because um I've been fortunate enough to be part of a team that actually creates that type of task force kind of in the beginning. And so it kind of taught me to go ahead and really just implement and go ahead and make sure that I am checking in with people. So I have to do it more on a one-on-one basis. However, doing things on a one-on-one basis, it's very difficult, because it's not a team collaboration, right? And the way that obviously we know with educators is that we only have so much available time. And a lot of the times it's difficult to squeeze in something that's like this, because we're so focused on academics. We're so focused on these kids being 2, 3 grade levels behind, and we're so focused on so many other things that we forget a lot of the times about our employees, right? We forget a lot of times about how important it is to do check-ins with employees and to create teams like this. It's definitely needed. I want to say that the collaboration piece is missing within the district. However, the check-ins definitely frequently happen, with me, because I try to support my teachers and support any staff member or adult that's within our building the best that I can on a one-on-one basis. But it's that team effort that's needed and that team collaboration that's needed, because otherwise you won't go ahead and retain your employees. You won't retain them within the district if they don't feel like there's a sense of team orientation.
Wow, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Super helpful.
Mhm.
So, I'm looking at your professional summary and your bio. It says that you've led some of this work. It looks like maybe a workshop or staff development or something like that.
Mhm.
Could you tell us a little bit about that if you'd like?
Sure. So I led a workshop, and it was very important for me to lead the workshop because at the time we did have most of our staff and faculty was Caucasian. A lot of them were Caucasian. And it was important for me to go ahead and really express to them, how it's like going ahead and being Caucasian and teaching in a 99.9% African American environment, right? And going ahead and really being able to support your students. And so it was really important for me to go ahead and just go ahead and give a workshop that's about that. It was uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. It was uncomfortable at first, but I had great advice from somebody who is a great mentor who kind of gave me the courage to go ahead and have that conversation. And again, I think that sometimes, in your head, you're thinking, oh, we can't have that conversation, right? We don't want to go ahead and have that conversation because people will feel uncomfortable. But as you start to have that conversation, they may feel uncomfortable at first, but then it really opens up for some great dialogue. And then you really get to find out truly your staff members from what they're sharing. Just the questions that you are able to ask them that helps them share some background about themselves, and it helps you make rapport with your staff members. But so I think it's important to go ahead and start the beginning of the school year out with that, because I really truly think that starting the school year out with a professional development series like that kind of helped us go ahead and grow as a team and to continue to have those conversations. Now, as for support and stuff, obviously you need to continue to support those staff members, throughout the school year. Because if you don't, again, continue to support them, then they will eventually go ahead and find another district that's going to support them. But it's interesting that you said that because of that professional development, I've been able to actually keep in contact with staff members that have left, and they'll even call me up and they'll ask me for advice, or they'll even go ahead and ask me for input on certain things, teaching in other areas within the city of Detroit. So I think that it kind of opened up dialogue and opened up conversation, and it made them feel supported.
Definitely. What I took away from that is it's very important to lean into those challenges, lean into the difficult. That's
Hmm.
the only way we're going to make those gains.
Yeah.
And you spoke to that cultural competence piece. That's very crucial. There's a lot of reasons why we feel that we should not have those difficult conversations, but there are a lot more reasons why we should.
Hmm.
We're going to make those gains. So,
Yeah.
I definitely applaud you and thank you for leaning into that challenge. You know, Sounds like you grew personally, your staff grew, and you created relationships that last.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So that kind of leads us into our next question. So we know that everything in school districts now is a competition. Everyone's competing for staff. We're competing for the same students. So marketing is a huge piece of what we do. So when we're thinking about branding,
Mhm.
how do we communicate? And without tokenizing, if you think about that word, how do we communicate um, to potential students, potential staff, that we are a destination for diverse staff? We embrace all your differences. We want you here.
Mhm. So I think that's I think that it's important to go ahead and definitely use like that general language, right? You definitely have to be inviting when you go ahead and you do your branding of your school or your district. Um, there's like coded language. I think that you definitely need to start avoiding. Um, you know, it's interesting because when you look through the different job descriptions, you'll start noticing that there's even like some gender like language that sometimes is included, right? Strong is usually referred to as they're looking for a male, right? Sometimes it's driven, sometimes it's competitive, sometimes it's supportive. When we think of the word supportive, we're thinking of more that they're looking for a kind of a female for that job, committed for a female for that job, responsible. All these different types of languages. I think that it's very important that you have to go ahead and give just a very general, neutral type of language within job descriptions. And obviously, when you're speaking too. And I think that's really important because you don't want it to seem like you're looking for a particular type of person. And I think that's very important for organizations to realize that. And then a lot of the times, it's not even so much who's like best for that job, right? You want to include people. You want to go ahead and make sure that you're including diversity within your corporation because at the end of the day, your organization is going to be able to grow, right? It's going to be able to flourish. So sometimes it's not about who has, the piece of paper that says they are the best for this job or they have the credentials that say that they're the best for this job. But it's important to go ahead and include that diversity.
So the two things that I take away from your answer was first is presenting, how do I want to say this? Presenting the opportunity for equal employment.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily that we want a specific person. It's that we want you to know that everyone has the equal opportunity to work here.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yes.
okay, definitely starting there. And watching our language, making sure that we're not being exclusionary with our language.
Yeah, it's really important for organizations to go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Now, just out of curiosity, in your travels as a school leader, have you been part of any student fair recruitments or employment fair, job fair recruitments?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So, have you had an opportunity to implement any of these pieces of advice?
So I haven't had the opportunity to actually implement them. Definitely HR is mostly the person that deals with, our job descriptions and things like that. But what I will tell you, being a part, because in education field, we always go ahead and we kind of like make sure that we're current with going ahead and going out there and, interviewing and making sure that we're up to date with things with our resume and stuff, because that's part of the education field nowadays. But what I can tell you is that I am noticing out there that there's a lot of organizations that are doing things like blind applications, that they are doing things like blind recruitment, to go ahead and make sure that they are getting people with the skills and the experiences. But it's very important to go ahead and do things like that as well. That way you're really focusing on a particular part of the resume. So I have seen things that are out there like that, but I haven't been a part of them.
Thank you. But it starts with observation, right? You've noticed
Yeah,
the need, right? So
yeah.
that's where it starts at. So, we know in education, we do our benchmarking, our preliminary assessments, then we make our adjustments. So, it sounds like you're in your preliminary assessment phase. You're looking at what potential barriers there are to recruiting diverse staff, and you're kind of wrapping your mind around your next action steps.
Yep, correct.
Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. So, thinking along those lines, can you give me an example of how you integrate inclusion in your daily work?
How I integrate it.
Hmm.
Okay, so I would say in my daily work, how I integrate it is I definitely go ahead and I'm definitely trying to build a team, right? Definitely going ahead and making sure that we have team building activities in front of those staff meetings, right? I wish that we had more time for professional development. Obviously, we didn't have as much time this year, but I think that it's important for you to go ahead and make sure that you have those kind of fuzzy wuzzy is what somebody called it once. Those fuzzy wuzzy little moments are, just in the beginning as an opening. And I think that it goes ahead and lets you see everyone's personality, how they are, gives them a chance to voice things. And I think it gets everybody a chance to know each other, right? And you're able to go ahead and build on that. So I think that that's important, and it's important for that activity to usually be engaging, right? So that it gets more people that involved with it. If it's not an engaging activity, then it's hard to really capture their true feelings and how they feel. And so you got definitely make sure that that activity is engaging and that people are enjoying it, right? And that it's a safe space to go ahead and actually share or talk or communicate to others. And it's important to definitely make sure that you are going ahead and that you are saying that, that this is a safe circle. This is a safe space to go ahead and for you to talk and for us to share our feelings. And so I think that's important. It also comes down to even the setup of a room. A lot of the times making sure that everyone is sitting at a circle, making sure everyone's in an equal playing field and an equal space and that we all can go ahead and just share. And I think that's important instead of going ahead and having that leader that's in the front of the room, right? Going ahead and saying, this is the activity that we're doing. It's not going to work that way. You have to make sure that it's a team effort and that people are together and people are equal in a circle.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let me press you to go a little further in depth. So, as a school leader, how do you model equity and inclusion in your daily practices? So, and let me elaborate just a little further.
Mhm.
If it were not a staff development day, and
Mhm.
I was just a teacher looking at you passing in the hallways, or a student for that matter, or a parent that was visiting, how would I see your equitable nature and your inclusiveness?
I think that a lot of the times it comes with your character. I think a lot of the times it comes with your gestures. It comes with, I respect you as a human being. Um, I think that there's a lot of different things that you can do as a person, I'm not going to go ahead and avoid you, right? I'm a very much a people person in general, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to respect you as a human being. And me and you are going to go ahead and have a conversation, have a dialogue, I also think it comes with a little bit of an attitude as well, I'm a very friendly, people oriented person. People know that I'm approachable, that you can come up to me and that you can talk to me, and that no matter what it is, I'm going to remain professional, right? I'm not going to go ahead and do anything else that's going to be not professional. And I think that that's why I have a lot of staff that do come up to me. I'm a very approachable person and I'm a very supportive person. And no matter what it is, you can always count that I'm going to support you and that I'm going to give you the best advice that I think is possible. And I'm going to put myself in my head, in your shoes for a moment to think, what would I do for myself, right? How would I go ahead and approach this situation? Being you, and those conversations happen quite frequently with staff members, and I think that helps them come back to you, to go ahead and continue to get that support that they feel like I know that I have their best interest.
Wow, thank you. So it
Mhm.
sounds like you're highlighting the importance for leaders to have emotional intelligence
Yeah.
and definitely have that empathy piece, able
Mhm.
to, so to speak, do a 180 and look at it from the perspective of their employees or whoever they're attempting to support.
Mhm. Yep.
Thank you. Definitely great. So our next two questions want to focus around something that you mentioned earlier. You spoke about having a majority Caucasian staff supporting or servicing a majority African American student body. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that a little bit, specifically in the realm of recruitment, selection, and retention. So here's the question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What are some creative ways to proactively source or recruit candidates from underrepresented communities?
The best way is definitely, I think, to highlight the things that are wonderful about whatever area it is or wherever you're working, right? You have to highlight those wonderful things. If you don't highlight those wonderful things, then people don't want to work there. You definitely have to go ahead and mention the things that you have that are those bright spots. Even when things feel like that they're failing, right? When things feel like you don't have any bright spots, it's important to go ahead and notice those bright spots and to really go ahead and make sure that you're letting staff members know what those bright spots are and go ahead and let them know your vision, right? Because if you cling on to those bright spots, you'll quickly develop a vision or where you want things to go, right? And I think that that's important to go ahead and do. Um, Part of the district that I'm in is part of a an alliance, right? And it's a community alliance. And I think it's important to go ahead and mention things like that. Some of the positive things that are happening within that area in order to go ahead and attract people to that area. And I think that's important. People want to feel like they're doing something that's good, and people want to feel like they're coming into a workplace that is going to be help support them as a person, and that they're going to be able to go ahead and obtain goals. And I think that's important to go ahead and make sure that you let people know that.
Thank you. Now, you kind of touched on this, but
Mhm.
I'm going to be more explicit.
It's okay.
If you're not familiar with this channel, we get very explicit.
It's okay.
So, do you have any tips for recruiting specifically people of color to your school when it's primarily Caucasian?
Okay, so do I have any tips for people who are African American into a Caucasian district, correct?
Yes, if you're recruiting people of color, let's say
Mhm.
Latinx or
Okay.
African American, to
Okay.
a primarily Caucasian staff, like if I came in and said, "How do I know I'm going to be safe here? How do I know it's going to be a non-hostile work environment?"
You're flipping this on me, aren't you? So I think that it's important to go ahead and recognize things that they can contribute or be a part of, right? Within that district. I think it's important to let them know that we value you as a person and we want to know more about you. We want to know more about your culture, and you can go ahead and open those doors for our students that are 100% Caucasian, right? That it's important that students learn what diversity is, and it's important that they have a variety of different types of, gender, variety of different types of ethnicity that's in front of them. Ultimately, that's the goal. When I think of my own daughter, I want my daughter to go ahead and be exposed, and I want her to know and celebrate different types of cultures that are out there, so that she can go ahead and she can recognize things, but also recognize the greatness, right? And the things that have been achieved, and all the different things that come with it. I think it's important to go ahead and have things like that, but it's more important to realize that the people that are coming to you, that they feel supported. And not only that, but they feel like there's an opportunity, right? An opportunity to go ahead and show the students, and to go ahead and let them know and go ahead and expose them to so many different things that are wonderful, right? And I think that that's important for them to do. It's okay that we're different, but let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then you tell me a little bit about yourself, right? And it just brings that dialogue, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that with students or kids, to go ahead and have those conversations.
Wow, thank you for handling such a tough question very well.
I had to
And
re-ask it considering I'm in a 99.9% African American district. So I was like, you're flipping this on me. So honestly though, it was a great question. I mean, I never really thought of it like that because as a teacher, here I had all of my students were African American, and we had conversations just about things like that all the time. And the students felt comfortable and safe to have conversations about that, and I think that's important as well.
and thank you again for handling that curve very well. Um, your performance on that question really highlighted the need for critical thinkers in leadership positions, right? So
Yeah.
we're coming up on our last question. Um, and this one kind of goes along the lines of what we just discussed. How do you counteract comments from leadership such as, "We just hire or promote the best person for the job, regardless of race or gender"?
Oh, that's so hard. So, I probably would say I wish you the best of luck and know that your focus, that you pick the best person that is going to have a focus on diversity, you know? It's a very difficult question to go ahead and respond to because at the end of the day, yeah, you just want to make sure that you're picking a person that's going to have a focus on diversity, right? That's going to go ahead and make sure. But when you're kind of rejected in a sense, I hate to say it, and you have to react to a comment that says, well, just to let you know, we picked somebody and we didn't go ahead and pick anybody with race or what was the other word that you used?
Gender.
Gender, yes. It's kind of hard because at the end of the day, you do have to react and you just say, thanks for the opportunity and I wish you the best of luck. And I hope that you pick somebody who definitely has a focus on creating a diverse atmosphere, you know? And I think that that's probably the best way. I think it kind of also kind of lets them know a little bit that, okay, you know, hopefully you did pick somebody who's going to be great for your district, but just keep in mind that it's important to make people feel supported.
Thank you. And let
Mhm.
me press just a little bit further because I think I didn't deliver that question quite the way I intended.
Okay.
So, as a school leader, you often partner with your human resource department
Hmm.
to hire someone or attempt to recruit.
Hmm.
So, in your building, you're looking at a 99.9% African American student body, and you're looking at a not 99.9% African American or people of color staff.
Hmm.
And in your mind, you say, hey, you know what? I know the importance of students seeing themselves in their teachers. So I personally want to make it a issue or a point to look at diversity. And
Hmm.
HR says, well, we really don't hire based on gender or race. We're just going to look at the best candidate on paper. How do you respond to that feedback from your HR department?
So, in other words, my HR department is going to be hiring, right? Uh, People that might, represent or look like the students, correct?
Actually, let me be clear. You're trying to encourage your HR department
Mhm.
to recruit a more diverse pool of candidates.
Okay.
And they're saying, well, we're not going to focus on diversity. We're just going to take the best candidate on paper.
Mm.
How do you navigate that statement?
So I think that it's important again to go ahead and make sure that they understand the reasons on why diversity is important. I think that you need to let them know that, students eventually are going to go ahead and go outside, and they're going to go ahead and be in front of other people that aren't going to necessarily look like them, act like them. There's out in the world, there's a whole bunch of different types of people, right, that are out there. That's what makes our wonderful world beautiful, right? And so it's important to expose children to these different varieties and I of people, And I think it's important, for them, HR, to understand that reason why it's important. And I do. I mean, as we know, because higher education, there you're when you look at higher education, it's very diverse, right? You have people that are from Africa that are teaching your class, right? You have people that have wonderful accents, right? And so it's important for you to go ahead and be exposed. It's important for children to be exposed to how many people that are out there, right? And I think that's really important. And I think HR would have to understand that reasoning on why, right? Nobody just there's a lot of times people don't just sit and in their area that they're from, right? People venture out and go to different places and stuff. And it's important to encourage that too.
Thank you. And I know that was a tough
Mhm.
question, and I I appreciate you bearing
That's
with me as
okay.
I rephrased it to kind of
It's okay.
try, yeah, to triangulate to the answer that I wanted to get from you.
Hmm.
And that was one of our, as we sent out a survey, that was one of our higher rated questions
Hmm.
because a lot of school leaders say, hey, we understand the need for diversity. We're at the ground level, and we're seeing the lack of parity or
Mhm.
representation between our student body and our staff. And with our cultural competence lens on, we know that that's important to kind of get that alignment.
Mhm.
But when we
Mhm.
attempt to make it happen and we connect with HR, they're like, absolutely not. We're just going to take the best person on paper. And very often, when you're doing paper screenings,
Mhm.
you get a non-diverse body of candidates.
Yeah, you do. I agree.
So we were hoping that you would give us a solution there, and we could fix this, and we could send it out to everyone. Like,
It's
you know,
it's a very yes, it's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing to go ahead and bring up. And a lot of times it's a difficult conversation to have as well.
okay, so everyone, audience, we're not going to get the answer how to fix this nationally today, but Carrie's going to come back to us and give us the fix on that.
Okay, I will go ahead and do a follow-up, I promise. I'm definitely going to be thinking about that one. Sometimes it's hard when it's things that aren't in your control, to go ahead and actually make suggestions or recommendations, but I definitely think that having that conversation of why diversity is important is where it begins.
Yep. And thank you. And to my audience, everyone, I'm being slightly facetious. This is such a heavy lift that there's no one that has the right answer. I
Mhm.
mean, every scenario is very different, but I applaud Carrie for even broaching the subject, because it is very difficult, but it is a needed conversation. So thank you so much. So we usually close every interview, and we're coming up on that time, by asking if there's anything that you would like to share that maybe didn't come across in the interview or my questioning.
Um, yeah, actually, yeah, I just want to go ahead and I just want to share how important it is to go ahead and make sure that you definitely get the professional development that's needed through your district. I think I already mentioned that within this interview, but it is very important to go ahead and in order for people to feel a sense of belonging, to make sure that you seek out a professional development, definitely having that neutral person to go ahead and help you navigate during these, that can be somewhat of a difficult conversation sometimes, even for building leaders. And that's probably the only thing that I just really want to stress to everybody that's out there. And I definitely want to thank you for your time. I definitely enjoyed this interview. And it definitely got me thinking too, even reflecting on my own practices as well. So I just want to thank you.
You are totally welcome. And I thank you in kind for donating your time on the weekend to field these, somewhat difficult questions.
Mhm,
And that was a perfect segment to end on. Everyone should be reflecting on their practice, right?
mhm,
We should be focused on continuous improvement in what we do.
mhm.
So that concludes our interview. Everyone, I'd like to thank you all for joining us on another episode of FECGTV, which is the Fisher Educational Consulting Group television channel. I'm your host, proud CEO and owner of the Fisher Educational Consulting Group. And this episode's guest was Mrs. Carrie Kucka, who is a school leader in the Detroit area. And she spoke with us today about strategies for increasing your diversity, equity, and inclusionary practices. Mrs. Kuka, thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much. Take care.